I want to start today with my all-time favourite sustainable business story. It's a tale of exploitation of natural resources, depletion of natural capital, the exploitation of communities, and the failure of a business model that didn't take into account the circular economy. My 7-year-old son loves it. It's a children's story. I wonder if anyone knows what it is. Well done. Here is the character. It's the Lorax by Dr. Seuss. Now, if you don't know the story, it's about a little guy who goes into a land with truffula trees, and he discovers he can make this thneed, which is a kind of scarf, out of the tree. And he wants to make money, so he chops more and more trees down to make the scarf. Doesn't take into account the local little forest creatures, all the waste, all the pollution. He chops down more and more trees, getting more and more excited. Then all of a sudden, he realizes he's chopped down the last tree, and that's the end of his business, the end of the story. There is, however, one seed which is given over to the reader, so there's potential there. The reason I told you that story is that it's a beautiful story of sustainable business, perfectly pitched to the audience, which is children. It doesn't use terms like natural capital and circular economy. It uses language that resonates with the children, the audience. And that takes me on to my first point. I'm going to talk to you today about 3 overarching principles about communication, and then I'm going to talk how you can apply them to the main elements of a communication plan, and I'll give you some practical tools you can use. So my main point, and the most important, I think, is to keep it simple. Life is complicated. I hate it if I have to read a sentence more than once to work out what it's trying to say. And this is a challenge. Clarity of writing follows clarity of thought. You need to think through first and get your message across as simply as you possibly can. Sustainability is full of acronyms and jargons. I'd like to know if anyone knows the answer to all of these here. I can tell you later if you want to find out. We really need to cut them out. There's way too many, and it's easy to assume our readers know what we're talking about because we're so familiar with them. And the biggest one of all, of course, is sustainability. And we heard this morning about the use of soft sustainability when you don't actually use that word. It all depends on who your audience is. Often when we communicate, we might be writing to many people, often many thousands of people, and that can be overwhelming sometimes to get your message across. So a little tip I often use is to think of one person who embodies that audience, a real person, and write to that person, him or her. It makes it a lot easier, a lot simpler. Now, a few months ago, I went to the Auckland Writers' Festival, and I was very fortunate to go to the talk by Haruki Murakami, who's a Japanese novelist. Now, his novels are about quite complex, surreal things, but I was really struck by something he said. He said when he started to write, he wrote down in Japanese all his thoughts, and he comes from a very literary Japanese background, so he knows heaps of stuff about complex ideas in writing. But he wasn't entirely happy with it, so he translated it to English, and then back to Japanese again, and then he had it. He found his style, which was simple. And I was quite struck by this, so I bought his most recent book, which is this one here, and I read it with that in mind. And I was amazed because the topics he writes about are really complex and surreal, and yet the language, the words he uses are so simple. It's so easy to read and understand. It's genius. And that's what I strive for every day when I'm communicating. My next point is find your voice. Who are you? Who is your organization? What's your personality? Once you've identified that, let it pervade all your communications. Now, we worked with Good Sense a couple of years ago to identify the Sustainable Business Network personality, and we came up with these 8 adjectives, which are quite a few. You might want to narrow it down to a smaller number, but this is who we are. It represents everything we do, our personality, and we try and let that pervade through all our communications. We have a visual identity as well, and visuals are an incredibly important part of communication. And we work with Fuse Creative to identify some visuals that reflect our brand personality. So we have a colour palette, which is bright, refreshing, and uplifting, and reflects our values. We choose images that represent New Zealand and a sunrise of new beginnings. And the green affirmation marks, the question marks, they are a positive affirmation of what we're trying to say. Now, as you might have guessed, I'm a glass half full girl, and I believe very much in the power of positivity to engage your audience. The psychologist Nikki Hare has written about the power of positivity in communicating sustainability. She says there is a good point to being negative because that really focuses the mind, but being positive is incredibly important. Sustainability more than any other topic, so you can view it in two different ways. Is it a problem, environmental devastation, or is it a solution? Jerry spoke just now about Z Energy being at the heart of the solution. And that's how we at the Sustainable Business Network like to see business. It's an opportunity. Now, the other half to finding your voice is listening, and that's an incredibly important part of communicating. When you've worked out what it is you want to say, whatever your goals are, you need to reframe that in your listeners', your audience eyes. It might mean it turning upside down their head, but what's in it for them? So what? Why should they care? And always bear that in mind. And finally, do the maths. Now, I'll let you into a secret. When I was at school, the subject I was best at was maths, which is kind of strange because I'm communicating. But when I was at school, even though I found it easy, I found it quite boring because it seemed too irrelevant. I couldn't relate it to anything. But now, I love it. And there's all sorts of ways you can use it to improve your communication. It's pretty simple to measure things. And it's a really good way of finding out what works, what doesn't. How many people click on your newsletter articles? What are the most popular articles? Last year, I did an analysis of all of them to work out which ones work best. And in case you're wondering, it's the ones with numbered lists. 5 things you need to know about X. 10 top tips, 6 things we love about X, Y, Z. Google, you can use Google Analytics and measure a website. There's all sorts of things you can do. This is a super simple way if you want to start. Each month, on the first of each month, measure the things that are important to you. This is a very simplistic way of doing it, but it's better than nothing, just to keep tabs on where you're tracking what's important for your business. And now we come to a communications plan. And what I want to say is those 3 principles I just said should pervade throughout your plan, all elements of it. And it is important to have a plan before you start. Now, the most important thing are the objectives. And a communications plan should underlie your business goals. You can't just start writing a plan unless you know what your business, your organization is trying to achieve. That might be for one specific event or project, or it might be for your annual plan. You need to work out what your business goals are and then how your communications can support that. What are the issues? What's the bigger picture? Look at the opportunities and the challenges. Audiences, this is crucial. The most effective communication plans identify very tightly the target audience. And the audience that is often forgotten is internal. It's your staff, your board. They should be your first point of call, your first audience. Then, of course, depending on who you are, there are other audiences. There might be your partners, your sponsors, the media, your social media organizations, industry organizations, your competitors. Work that out before you start. And write to them. And what I said before about finding your voice is listening, reframing what you want to say in their eyes. Why should they care? What's in it for them? What are your key messages? And again, this goes back to the point about keeping it simple. Use key words, and once you've worked out what your messages are, let them pervade all of the things you want to say. And now we get on to the practical part. Now, I did a bit of research, and I was really quite amazed to find out that only about half of New Zealand's small and medium-sized businesses have any online presence at all. That's a website or social media channels. That's massive. And if you can't read this, of those that do have an online presence, 22% just have a website, 9% only social media, and 16% have both. I don't think that's a lot for only about half of businesses to have an online presence. And yet, of those who do, they're performing better. So this is the most recent data from NYOB. In the past 12 months, the businesses that had a website, 50% of them reported an increased revenue, compared to only a third of the businesses that didn't have a website. The benefits, you can probably imagine, they're things like generating more customer inquiries, making it easier to do business. And you can find this on NYOB's report. This is a Sustainable Business Network's website. We launched this nearly 2 years ago. We worked with Good Sense to do the initial planning behind it. Inspiral-worthy web developers, and Fuse made it look beautiful with the design. And they did an awesome job. And we try to use those 3 principles throughout, every day, through our writing to keep it really simple. You don't want too much information. Images, choose a few really great images. If you're a small business or not-for-profit, it's really worth investing in a few great images you can use. And you can monitor how it's doing through Google Analytics, which is totally free. Search engine optimization helps a lot through identifying your keywords. If you don't have a big budget, if you're not-for-profit, you can create a website for free using templates through these 2 sites here. Newsletters and emails. This is where we go to the fun part. This is the writing. And there's lots of different ways you can write newsletters. I mentioned the numbered lists. They're doing really well. Opinions and blogs regularly top the type of engagement, the content that people like. But there's all sorts of other things you can use. This is an example of the Sustainable Business Network's newsletter. It comes out weekly on a Tuesday, and you can sign up on the front page of our website if you haven't already. And we try and apply those 3 principles throughout. It's a great way of sharing the many success stories we have amongst our members. We use MailChimp to send our web newsletters out. It's free up to about 2,000 subscribers. So if you don't have a big budget, it's a great way of setting up a newsletter. They have lots of different templates you can use. Social media. Now, we've heard a bit about this today from Matthew. This is massively growing in importance. In New Zealand, 42% of businesses currently are active on social media. Now, I'd love to know who here, your business, put your hand up if your business has any social media channel. That's great. That looks like about 60–70% at a rough guess. I actually did an analysis of the Sustainable Business Network members. I looked at how many members have Facebook accounts and how many have Twitter. And it's about 50% have Facebook, about 40% have Twitter, which is high compared to the rest of New Zealand businesses. So that's really encouraging that sustainable businesses are leaders in their field. Facebook and LinkedIn, by far and away, the most popular social media channels. Now, I'm going to start with Facebook. Facebook, although we're hearing a lot about its decline, particularly among younger audiences, it's still massively influential. On Monday of last week, 1 billion people around the world logged into Facebook in one day. That's phenomenal. That's 1/7 of the people in the world went onto Facebook, and it's growing. So depending on who your audience are, it might be a very effective way to engage with them. Facebook is the ultimate social site. It's all about family and friends and consumer issues. So for us, we find it works well about things like food, transport, household waste, not so well for things like business models. People don't want to know. These organizations I've identified as doing a really good job on Facebook. So if you want to get some tips, find out who's doing it well and learn from them, I recommend all of these sites. They're using images a lot, and images are crucial in Facebook, increasingly so. They're sharing content of other people's things and have a variety of content. And a couple of these are financial institutions, which you might not think doesn't sound very interesting in terms of engagement, but they make their Facebook posts really interesting. So check out any of these guys if you want to learn how to do it well. Tools for Facebook. I mentioned images, they're so important. You can resize them now to the optimum size of Facebook, so it's really eye-catching. And these are 2 websites you can do that for free. Now, Twitter. I'll go on to Twitter. Another of my top 10. These guys are doing an awesome job on Twitter. And if you want to know how to do Twitter well, I really recommend checking any of them out. They're really hot on visuals. On Twitter, if you use visuals, it gets 150% better engagement than without. They're being very generous in sharing content of other people, and they have a variety of content as well. And they're not all large businesses. A lot of these are not-for-profits, some of them are small businesses, and they're doing a really good job. So I recommend checking any of them out. Now, Twitter tools. Hashtags. If you don't know what a hashtag is, and I won't assume you do, because I know not everyone does, a hashtag is that fine little sign identifies a keyword. And on Twitter, it's incredibly useful to search and find topics related to a particular theme. Also, what happens on Twitter, it can show you what's trending on a particular day. Twitter is great for news junkies. So Facebook is really, really social. Twitter is more younger people as well, and it's pretty equal between men and women, and it's great at news. So a lot of people use it to see what's trending on any particular day. And guess what's trending #1 today? Project NZ. So isn't that great? So thank you to you guys, all you here who've been tweeting. We've been the #1 trending topic on Twitter today. And that's a really powerful way of getting a sustainability message across to potentially a whole different audience. Twitter lists, I think, are one of the best kept secrets about Twitter. If you go onto Twitter, you might be following hundreds, maybe thousands of people. And when you look at your post, you'll only see what's happening at any moment in time. You can create a list, which is a subset of all the people you follow. For example, I've created a list of SBN members. So I can go in quickly every day, and I'll see what they're doing. So it's a great way for us to keep up to date with what you're doing, and we will retweet and share that content when it's relevant. So I really recommend them. Scheduling, you can schedule posts. Buffer and Hootsuite are two great tools. I use Buffer. It's really, really easy. So you just write what you want to say, and you can schedule it to go out at any time. And that's useful if you have international markets in particular. And then again, the images I mentioned, same two sites you can use for free to resize your images to the optimal size for Twitter. Now, I just briefly mentioned the other social media channels. What I will say is that there are so many, and it's far better to do one well than to try and spread yourself too thinly and try and do too much. Because if you do start, you do need to try and keep it up and be active on it. I'll just briefly mention a few of these. LinkedIn is really taking off. We've had more than a 50% increase in followers in the last 12 months. It's a great way of generating conversations between people. You can create groups on LinkedIn on particular subjects, which makes it a really easy online forum for people to engage. Really taking off as a professional networking tool. YouTube, I want to mention because videos are massively growing in importance. YouTube's owned by Google, so it will rank them really, really highly. And then I'm going to mention Periscope at the bottom. Periscope is one of the newest social media tools. There are new apps that start up all the time, but this one is really taking off. It was only launched in March this year by Twitter. It's owned by Twitter, and it's massive. In its first 10 days, 10 million people signed up for an account. What it is, it's an app you can use on your phone, and only on a phone, and you live stream video of anything. So you pick up your phone, you press a button, and it's as simple as that, and you film whatever you want, and that is fed out live throughout your Twitter feed to all your Twitter followers and your Periscope followers. So if you don't have a big budget, it's a really great way of communicating through video for free. We use it today. We live streamed Matthew Yeoman's talk and Nikki Bell's talk. So for people around the world who couldn't come to this, they could watch it for free. And I predict that will really take off in New Zealand. It's just starting here. I have noticed some New Zealand organisations starting to use it. Hallertau Brewery, Greenpeace, BNZ, I've noticed using it. I think it will really take off soon. Media, I won't say much about media because we had a great media panel earlier. But if you want to keep tab of any mentions of you in the media and you don't have the budget for a proper media monitoring service, you can use Google Alerts. You can set some keywords, and every time something comes up online, it will let you know. Mention is an app I use. It's not foolproof, but it's a great way of getting alerts of online coverage. It won't pick up everything and won't pick up print at all. And Twitter, I pick up a lot on Twitter of our media coverage. And finally, just a few other resources. Images, there are often some questions about copyright images of using images off the internet. If you want to be safe about that, there are two sites here you can use images for free with no copyright issues. Infographics, this site here has got all sorts of templates you can create your own. If you want to learn more on a course, I can highly recommend the Sustainable Marketing online course that Kath from Good Sense created. I've done the course, and it's really great. I'd highly recommend it. It's got an enormous amount of resources and case studies, and there's a flyer on the desk just outside if you would like to find out more. And then news, Communications has evolved so much in the 20-odd years I've been in it, and it's important to stay up to date with the changes. For example, things like Facebook changes its algorithm all the time, and it's really useful to know what it's going to rank highly so you can adjust what you're posting to match that. I follow Reagan Communications. They have a daily email that I find great for communications. It has the latest in writing, editing, presentations, all sorts of useful tips. And finally, I'm going to finish with a quote from our friend the Lorax, just to remind ourselves of why we're here. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Thank you very much.